Welcome to this session on getting started with Visual Hospital Manager or VHM as I would refer to it during this session. Now, prerequisite for this session is that you have installed Visual Hospital Manager or VHM on your computer already using our installers. Now, agenda for this session would be to launch the VHM, then walk through the master data setup and do some configuration settings. And we will do this live through the application. So let's go to the live demo. Now, when you have already pre-installed the application, you would see a icon like this on your desktop, or you can search it through your start window. Now, let us launch the application from here. I would double click this. Now, when you start VHM for the first time, it will ask you basically for your hospital or clinic name. Now, this is how the interface of the application looks. Now, let's say I'm going to call this Sanjeevani Hospital. Then there is a year that it asks you to define. Now, this is not really an accounting year, but this is a partition of the data that is created for whatever year you specify. And then for the sake of aligning it with our April to March financial cycle, I'm going to call it accounting year 2023-24. So whenever I start VHM next time, I would get a selection between different accounting years. One of the advantage of this is also that your data is partitioned across all these years. So even if you use this application for 5 years or 10 years, it will not happen that the data has become too much and application has slowed down. At any point of time, it will be operating only on this particular partition of the data, which keeps it always speedy and fast. All right. Let's say OK. Now it has created a partition, and now it is asking you if you want to retain the master data. Now this master data is something that we have provided you by default in the application. You may choose to remove the master data by saying no here. It will provide you a completely clean slate. But we advise you against it because then it is a lot of work to do to set up the master data from the beginning. And it will delay your starting to use this application in practice. So let's say yes. Now username and password to start with, you can use these username passwords. And then I would get into the application. So I'm into the application, and here are different menu options that you have that you can use to run the application. Now we are going to look at master data. Now, for example, I go to laboratory names. This is where I define if my hospital, as a doctor, I'm referring to myself now, if my hospital has different diagnostic centers. So for example, it may have a laboratory, it may have an infertility investigation center, it may have an ultrasound clinic, and so on and so forth, maybe CT scan, MRI, and that kind of clinics. So I just go on adding them here, and then I save this. Next item would be to define investigations under these particular laboratories or diagnostic centers that we defined. So let's say under hospital laboratory, I have added all these tests. I've defined them. Then under ultrasound clinic, I've defined some. Under X-ray clinic, I've defined some. And if I have a new clinic, I can define that new clinic and add new tests under that clinic. It's absolutely easy. Now, if we look at each test here, for example, abdomen KUB view. Now this has a memo where you can write some notes about this by default. And then when this test is done for the patient, those notes would be imported for the patient and you can modify them there. So it becomes a patient's report. The template here that you type will remain intact. Then you can see there are 7 categories of charges. Now I have specified only first category. We will see what these categories are. Because normally in any hospital, these categories are not used widely. Only one rate list is there for all the tests and other charges. But in case your hospital is supporting normal price list, CGHS, maybe a separate price list for a associated hospital, then you could use this category 1, 2, 3, 4, and then specify respective charges. here. So for example, if I specify 130 for category 2, I specify 140. For category 3, I specify 110. Now, when I add a patient into the system, I associate a category of charges with the patient. And then accordingly, from that category, those particular charges will be added to patient's bill due, depending on whatever investigation is assigned to the patient. So this is how basically this entire laboratory or diagnostic center and the investigations work. Then next we would go to the diagnosis. Now we have added some diagnosis by default. These question marks indicate that you can prioritize those in the list if they are most commonly used diagnosis. But otherwise, these are just all the diagnoses we have picked up and we have put in here. You can go on adding new diagnoses that you practice and then save that. So they are available for you to select when you are adding patients' clinical details. Then procedures. So you could have daycare procedures specified here. You can add new procedures. You can remove whatever procedures you don't want to practice or you don't use it in your hospital. And then you can also add a memo here for a particular procedure. Now, for example, this is a sample memo I have added by one of our doctor who is using our software. And then I save it. So if I want to edit it, I can say edited notes here. And then I can save it. So next time when I open the memo, I see edited notes here. And then you would see M capital wherever there is a note. It would be small m of memo if there is no note behind this particular procedure. So this is how you can interpret. Then operations, I can define operations here, and then I can define charges for different categories of patients. I can also add a memo here. So this is sample operation note memo. Of course, this can be much more meaningful. I'm just giving a demo here. And I save this. So again, you can see that this M is become capital because there is some memo defined for this particular operation. You can add operations, you can delete operations if you want, and then save it. Then let's look at bill breakup first. Now, these are different services that your hospital or clinic offers to the patient. You can go on adding new services or you can delete the services as usual. And you can also categorize them between indoor OPD services, diagnostic services, indoor OPD services, and then accordingly, you can specify also the charge. Now here you don't have any categories, there are fixed charges. And you can always change these charges when you add them for the patient's bill. There is also a facility of setting up bill breakup printing order. Because you go on adding this bill breakup, as we call it, in random order, you can still set an order here. So they will be arranged in the bill in this particular printing order. Now let's look at prescription dictionary. Now, as we know, medical prescription or medicine prescription is a very important aspect of medical documentation for a patient. We also provide a facility whereby you can print this prescription in multiple languages. And this is where I can actually define different terminologies used in a prescription. And then there, for example, here you can see Marathi translation or Hindi translation, Gujarati translation, and so on and so forth. We will see this, how it is used when we prescribe a medicine for the patient. You can add new words and then you can add these translations. Okay, the next level would be about stocks. So here you can define medicine groups and medicine names. So for example, if I have defined amoxicillin as a group, then these are different medicines that I define under it. Each of the medicine, you can specify that it's a syrup, how many times a day, and what is the dose normally. And then you can go on adding new medicines. You can remove unnecessary medicines that we have already provided in the master data. And then you can also add new groups for defining the medicines. Of course, we have provided some set of medicines based on what our doctors have been practicing and what is in the market. But we advise very strongly that you go through these medicines and go on adding your own medicines from different brands, which is latest in the market. And that will really help you make your prescribing medicines very fast. Similarly, we can also define some stock. So there could be different stock items added here. You can specify the purchase rate. You can specify the selling rate at which you want to charge the patient if it is used for the patient. And then, of course, there are opening stock and reorder levels that you can maintain here. So please use this to add more items and delete the stock items if they are not necessary. Then in staff details, you can specify the details of consultants who are visiting your hospital, whose charges you would bill to the patient. You can go on adding new consultants or delete the consultants. Then also information about the referring doctors that you can go on adding here. Account details. Now this is not an accounting system really, but there are some basic functions related to the patient like payments and receipts and stock management that we need to do. For that, you are able to then define different accounts. So cash in hand, for example, salary account, you can add employee names here, and then you can also manage it within this system. But again, this is not an accounting system. Then you can define different checklists. So for example, here I can define a checklist called pre-operative preparation. And then I can specify the memo. So prepare the patient. Second, prepare the OT. Third, sanitize equipments. Fourth, contact anesthetist for availability, and so on and so forth. So what I'm essentially doing here is I'm preparing a checklist that before an operation, I would just take a printout and tell my assistant that please take care of all these items before we start the operation. And you can define checklist for example, admission. You can define a checklist that when a patient is admitted, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, n number of things to be done. So that is how you can use this checklist. So you can just print it very quickly from there and I can view it. So this is a checklist that I had defined for pre-operative and I can just take a print by clicking print button here. Next, it is calendar. Now this is a calendar which you can use to define certain important aspects. So for example, birthday of Satish. So this is some kind of a table calendar. You can just switch between the dates and you can see what is basically specified for that particular day. It's a kind of a reminder for you. Then there is prescription library. Now this is also a very important aspect. Now you can see that this is basically a prescription that is already stored here for cervical spondylitis. And I'm going to name it as cervical spondylitis mild. So if the diagnosis is cervical spondylitis, and I know as a doctor that patient is suffering from mild symptoms of CS, then I would use this prescription and I save this. The way this is used is, so when prescribing medicine prescription for the patient, I will just select this name and all these medicines will automatically pop up. And then I can change it for the patient there. Now here I can see that I have not really specified this correctly. So I specified, change it, I save it, right? Now I can add a new prescription. Now I'm not a doctor, so I'm just going to take some sample medicines. Please ignore the correctness of that. So let's say I say that somebody is having a rash, allergic rash, and then I would here call it a rash severe. So I can have multiple variations of prescriptions for rash, one for mild rashes, severe rashes, or moderate rashes. So you can create any number of prescription variations for a diagnosis. So it becomes really easy for you to select one of them for a particular diagnosis for the patient. Now I'm going to say that, okay, in this I'm going to use maybe, let's say, anti-allergic. In that I have specified these medicines. I'm going to select these two medicines and I'm going to say 1. Okay. For how many days? 5 days. 5 days. So let's say this is a cream and I would say here after food. Sorry. Okay. This is a read only. This has, when I specify the medicine, I have to, in the medicine master, say that this has to be taken before food, after food, and that will automatically come here. Yeah. And now I save this as rash severe. So if there is an allergic rash as a prescription, as a diagnosis, I would get this as a selection. Then I may also now change this a bit, say mild, and then change the medicine. Okay. I change the medicine to, let's say, this lotion, and I remove this lotion. So let's say this is basically the prescription for a mild okay, a tablet for a mild rash, and I save it. So basically, if I find this for allergic rashes, I would say rash mild. I would, if I add a prescription, let's say rash severe for allergic rash, and I select a group which is anti-allergic, and then I select Colora lotion and let's say Noridin. And here I specify dose as this. I specify 5 days it has to be used, 5 days, and then type is, let's say cream. Okay, and then I save this. Now, if next time I try to find for allergic rash, I would see 2 of them. If I select rash mild, this will be automatically loaded for the patient while prescribing. And once you use this more and more, this library becomes really rich and your prescribing medicine becomes a matter of seconds. You can define these prescription templates here, or you can also save the template into the library when you define it for the patient. So there are 2 ways you can actually start going to continue to build this library. And that is what really makes it more and more useful, because at runtime also you are building the library. All right. Then let's go to utility. This is where the registration form is, and I'm going to define this. Now this is used for header on your reports if you want to include it as that. I'm just going to have a sample one. Let's say, okay, this is a master part of master data. Now there are multiple levels of user categories here or users. So you can have an administrative user, billing counter user, cashier, nurse, consultant, and so on and so forth. Now it is quite obvious here that if a user is a consultant, a doctor, it is important that that person has visibility to all the medical data of the patient, right? Maybe also billing data. But a person who is in the billing counter doesn't have to have access to the medical data of the patient. Now, if we want to try this out, how it works, I would go to user information. I would define a user, let's say administrator 1. I mean, this could be Satish or Sujata or any name. I'm just doing it for the clarity. Or let's say admin 1. Password is the same for the simplicity. And I would say that this person is a admin person and save. And then I would say doctor 1. Keep the password same for simplicity again. Oh, sorry, I need to add a doctor 1, doctor 1, and then I say user type as consultant and save. Now I'm going to show you something in practical aspect. So this is a patient entry form that we have, right? I'm going to just add a quick patient here, test patient, so that I enable all these tabs. They are disabled because there is not even a single patient in the system till now. And then I would put the telephone name, Birth date 01/05/1978. Then male, height is 158, let's say 67. Occupation is service. General category. Now this is where the charges would be in the category. We looked at the charge category. So if I specify CGHS here, which is a category 2, then all the charges I have specified for category 2 for different services will automatically be considered for this patient when the billing happens. Then who has referred the patient? For example, there could be none, or there could be, let's say, Dr. Manali. Who is the consultant under whom the patient is admitted? Dr. Moite. Then address I can put, and I can just put a city here. I can put the admission date here if the patient is admitted. Sorry, 23 at 12:00 p.m. in the afternoon, and I would save the patient. Now, of course, when you first save first patient, all these get enabled, and this patient gets an IPD number because I have added a admit date here. We'll see those details later. But now you can see that this login user, which is S, which is a super login, I'm able to see all the data of this patient. Now, this is our single form for all activities kind of interface where everything about the patient happens in this form, and that is what makes it really useful. But now coming back to our point, super user is able to see everything. Now let's log in with doctor. You remember this is a user we added. Now if we again go here, this doctor is also, now you can see user right is consultant. He is also able to use and see everything. Now let's log in as admin1. You remember this was an admin kind of a user that we had added. Now this guy also has the information because we did not configure the security for this user. So if I go to patient form access, and for admin user, I say that this person doesn't need to have visibility to clinical details, documents page, operation notes, then test investigations, because this is all clinical data. And then I save this. Now let's try it again. Here you have admin, and you can see that this page is not accessible to the user. So this user will be able to see only consultant charges added, service charges added, inventory, any stock used for the patient, bed allocation details, and the billing details, but not the medical data. Now this is how you can basically configure all the security. Even the menu that this person can access can be locked. So this is different menu items. If I click here, account head-wise detail or account groups, then this administrative person is not able to see that menu item or access that menu item at all. So this is basically also the access security for this. So you have a menu that you can configure for access locks, or you can lock the patient information. Okay. Then there is a configuration auto update. So for example, when I'm adding or prescribing medicines, do I want to add them automatically to the case paper or not? So you have different type of configurations here. Auto generate patient registration number, IPD number, OPD number. So do you want system to generate those numbers, or you want to put them manually? So there is a lot of configuration that you can basically do here. So receipt number, bill number, and consultant charges in patient bill, should they come automatically or not? If you don't want them to come automatically, you can disable this and you can manually put them into the bill. So this is different auto update setups. There are margins. So for different Marathi, Hindi prescriptions that we print, then what kind of print header margins we want. So this is that configuration. So here, for example, we have 8 lines at top, 5 spaces in the left, and then depending on the stationery that you're using, you can reconfigure this setting. Discharge time, normally it is 12 p.m., but how many hours before or after you don't want to charge additional day for the patient? It may be 2 hours, it may be 4 hours, depending on the hospital. So you can configure it here. And then print headers. So if you are printing a medicine prescription, do you want all the hospital name and everything printed and on top, or you are using a pre-printed stationery? Depending on that, you can disable or enable this. accordingly, then it will not work. So if, for example, you are using a pre-printed stationery, you are going to switch this off. So it will not print. And depending on the print header configuration, how many lines at the top you have left, it will then start printing from there. So those 8 lines we saw, they represent the pre-printed stationery top margin, for example. This is the configuration. Okay, then patient categories that we talked about, you can define those here: general, CGHS, special category. A fourth category could be own hospital. So if patient is referred by your own hospital branch to your main hospital, then your charges might be different, so and so forth. Or it could be a company name. So I say Bajaj Auto. You can have a special charge list for Bajaj Auto. That is also possible. All right. Then we have settings. So for Marathi, we have used this font. You could define or use your own font, and then your prescriptions will use that font for printing. So this is an extreme level of configuration that we have provided. Create new year directory. So here, as we saw that we have accounting year defined here, or the partition defined here, you can create new partition by clicking add accounting year. And then it will create new master data, and your next accounting year data will be in that particular partition. So you keep your application fast all the time. Then we also have a troubleshooter here, which will self-repair the application. For example, if you get some error, we may just ask you to run this VHM troubleshooter, and 90% of the cases, it will resolve the problem itself. For 10% cases, of course, then we will help you in solving that issue. Then we have a backup facility for the application. Full backup is where even the patient reports and everything is backed up. And then we also have a restore facility. And this is exit. So basically, this is what I wanted to show to you during this session. I thank you for your time, and I really look forward to meeting you again in our next session.